Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and I have the Jarl DM with me today, Louis Collins. Iskloft is the Viking campaign setting that you just launched on Kickstarter. But not only that, you've been playing this campaign setting for years now. Is this the one that Ryan was in a campaign with you years ago?
Yep, it sure is. Quite a few years ago, Ryan played in a long campaign with a bunch of other people. But it's changed a lot since then. It was like when I first started it. I think my first D&D game that I ran was how about D&D but Vikings. That was like ages ago. And then it's like over years become more focused on the Viking stuff and less on the fantasy stuff. And but yeah, Ryan played a dwarf. But like a sort of Tyrion Lannister dwarf with
Yeah, a
yeah,
human that had dwarfism as
yes,
opposed to a fantasy
exactly.
dwarf.
Yeah.
He played a diviner, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently you're a huge fan of Viking and Viking culture, and you're bringing that into
Yes.
D&D. So was it hard to kind of get the gritty feel you wanted into a fifth edition game, because it's not very D&D's not has never been very granular.
No, so yeah, it took lots of iterations, I think, to get it to the point where it feels dangerous. Um, so we changed like resting mechanics was like the first thing we did. So we stretched those out so that a short rest now in Iskloft is a full day and a long rest is a week, um, which is pretty punishing. But if you think about it, like if you've been hit by a sword in the arm, you're going to need like a week to get over that at least, you know. So that little things like that, and then we have created these brutal critical tables. So like when you get critically hit, you could die, among many other injuries that you can get along the way and stuff. So yeah, it took lots of doing and lots of tweaking here and there and like little changes and stuff. But over the years that we've been playing this setting, like it's become pretty gritty and realistic. I mean, you can't use realistic when you talk about D&D, but you know, something approximate. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was always like kind of like, so I've heard the argument about, well, I don't like the rest mechanic in 5e. It's not realistic. I only think you should be able to heal by magic. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, opposed to being stabbed with a spear 7 times and walking away, is realistic. In what
Yeah.
in what world does that really matter? So I'm like, whatever. But depending on the style of play, now that's completely different. I
Mhm.
think that's actually even one of the options in the DMG. They have ways to make it uh, even more fantastical as far as how fast you can recover, or more deadly.
Yeah. They have like I think they have like epic fantasy rules, which is like a 5 minute short rest and
Yeah.
like an hour for a long one. And then yeah, we've gone the other way, which is like just way too long. Like you really have to. What the thing that I notice about it is, if you make the rest times very long and you make injuries a part of the game, is that players really think about if they want to get into a fight. Um, Even if they think they're going to win that fight, they're like, is it worth us going in here, maybe getting somebody critted and like losing a leg, or like getting an infection or something like that? Like, is it really worth it? Which changes the way the game works, I think, in a good way for me.
No, I agree, because the more deadly the game is. Like, look at like a popular series like Game of Thrones. It's like most of those people really don't want to fight unless they know the fight's already won,
Yep, for
and
sure.
their ass isn't on the line.
Yep. That's for sure. The feeling is like it's kind of Westeros feeling in the way that people fight as well. So I've done lots of archetypes that like focus on the sort of dirty fighting aspects, because if you have to live, then you'll do whatever like the fight in Iskloft doesn't look like two dudes with swords like on guard. Like there's none of that. It's all headbutts and like knees to the balls and all this like rough stuff, because if you need to live, then you're gonna do whatever it takes to live through the fight.
uh, a while back we had another Viking enthusiast on. He actually trains in, I guess there's like Arma and other Western martial arts, but he was training in the Viking style, and he actually makes Viking shields,
Oh my god, I need
which
to
is
get in
which
contact
is
with
pretty
that
cool.
man.
I was like, I wish we had room on the set, because I would definitely get some Viking shields with the Nerdarchy logo on them to throw
That
up
would be
there.
rad.
House Nerdarchy.
Mm.
So what kind of changes? What kind of other changes have you made? What can people expect to get out of the book in the Kickstarter?
So we have four now because of a stretch goal classes, which are brand new and made. There's a Berserker, which is a So the berserker that you think of when you think of berserker is like the D&D berserker, which is just like a maniac who goes into a rage. But in Viking culture, the berserker, the rage comes from Odin, like the god of gods, and it's like a holy thing. Like you've been blessed with this rage. So he like chooses you, and then you like can go into this like sacred sort of trance thing. So the berserker is like a holy warrior who goes into a trance, and that's the berserker. Then there's the Herseer, which is like a commander, like a warlord class, which is one of my favorite things about 4th edition. I know it's not a popular edition, but I thought the warlord was just great, and there's nothing like it in 5e, where you can like use your actions to command your allies and like buff them and that kind of thing. Because I missed that. That's like my favorite thing to play is me not do anything, just stand in the back and go, you kill him and you kill him and all that sort of stuff. There's the first ganger, which is a take on the ranger. It's not quite a ranger. It doesn't have any magic. And it focuses on aspects of like stealth and like surviving in the world. And then we have, I can't remember. So we've done a total rework of the fighter into a Drenger. Drenger is like a word in Norse that like translates to sort of like honor or like the good sort of manly qualities. And then there's the outlaw, which is the opposite of that. That's kind of the rogue. So the rogue in Iskloft is not just like a thief. It's somebody who has been outlawed. And that was like the punishment you would give people if they did something really terrible, like break an oath or lie, which in Viking society was like such a big deal. And you would brand them with some sort of symbol, and they would be like kicked out of the settlement and have to live on their own out in the wilderness, which is basically a death sentence. And then the big one is the Sather, which is the sort of magic class. It's very low magic, this setting. Most people will go through their lives and never see anything magical. So the Sather is divided into lots of different sort of types of magic, but they're all quite subtle. So you might have a Völva, who is like a priestess of Odin. You might have a Galder, who does rune magic. So there's like 24 letters in the runic alphabet, and each one has different meanings, and they like get to use those to create magical effects. It's a singer, because singing is super important, like a skald. And then there's a Seith Kona, which is like a female caster that has to like allow herself to be possessed by spirits and use their magic in that way. So it's kind of like risk reward. Like, do you want all the power? But if you take all the power, you might never come back from being possessed, kind of thing, you know?
Oops.
Yep.
So it sounds like all the magic classes are basically one class with different paths you can take.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So it's one class that has 4 archetypes at the moment.
Nice. So there is a question in the chat, and folks, if you have questions, just put question in front of it. It makes it a lot easier for us to pick them out. James Leslie wants to know, with making the game more deadly, has that cut down on active murder hoboism, or are they still running in and try and kill things and seem confused when they died?
I think it cuts down dramatically on murder hoboism, because the chance of them dying is so much higher. So you find that, or I find that players are much more thoughtful in how they approach problems. They're much more less likely to just be like, okay, let's just kill these guys, because even when you fight 4 dudes in a bar, you could still get killed. You know, there's always a risk. Even if you're a great warrior, there's always a risk of you getting like accidentally critically hit, or like we also use system shock, which is like the rule where if you take over half your hit points in one hit, then there's bad news there. So yeah, I think it cuts down on the murder hoboism, to be honest. I think people are more thoughtful when there's so much more danger for their characters.
I want to thank Fantasy Grounds for the super chat. And then Jay Hansen wants to know, will the golden apples of Indu be in there?
That is such a call. Yes, they will. It's a spell that Seith Kona can do to enchant some apples to heal their friends. The actual golden apples of Idun are like how the gods maintain their immortality. And there's thoughts about maybe making that a magical item, though it's not certain yet.
Yeah, Loki fucked everybody over with those.
Yep.
Yeah, I recently listened to Neil Gaiman's retelling. And I just pretty much most of the Norse problems were either someone wants to bang Freya or Balder, and then then there was like some other stuff that Loki did.
Yeah.
pretty much. But it seems like all the problems kind of stem from that area.
Yep. And so many of the stories are like, hey, look, Thor is dumb, you know?
Yes, there's a lot of that
Pretty
as well.
cool.
But
Yeah.
don't tell him because he will snap your neck for it.
Yep. This is my favorite bit is Lokasena, which is like the gods are having a party and Loki comes and he just calls everyone names. He like comes in and kicks the door in and he's like, "Oh, and you're terrible and you're stupid and all the rest." And they're like, "Hey, Loki, you should stop that, or Thor's going to come here and give out to you." And he's like, "I'm not afraid of Thor." And he's like giving loads of lip to everybody. And then Thor comes and he's like, "What were you saying?" And Loki's like, "Nothing, Thor." Great.
So Elfbait wants to know, as a low magic setting, how are you handling monsters?
So most of the bad guys that you will fight on a day-to-day basis in Iskloft are other people. Um, it's kind of I think Westeros is like a good, or like Game of Thrones is like a good kind of example. There is magic, but it's rare and most people don't see it. There are some monsters. Notably, there are creatures called Jotunite who are agents of the Jotun, who are like giants. So the Jotunite are like 15 feet tall. They're very rare. You don't see many of them. And they tend to like get hired as mercenaries, or like they live for a very, very long time. And so they're some of the scary dudes that you can see. There's also like strange animals. There's Donarulf, which are like thunder wolves, giant wolves like the size of horses, that live in some of the dark forests. And there are creatures and stuff there. And there's notably the Elfer. So the elves are predatory and frightening and sort of, if you've ever read like Terry Pratchett, he has like this great thing with the elves where they're the fair folk, but they're kind of frightening and scary and cannibalistic. And I always think that elves should be scary because they live forever and they like are kind of alien and weird. So that's they're some of the big bad guys are the elves in Iskloft.
Yeah, I kind of think Grimm.
Yeah,
Grimm's fairy tales is kind of
exactly.
dark fae. And even the good fae aren't particularly great. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and there's like laws that govern them, like they can't lie, but they can twist words or whatever. But they also like fear unforged iron and like a couple of other things that are like from real fairy tales or whatever that have been brought in.
I do want to point out too, the art over there on your Kickstarter page is fantastic. If that's indication of what's going to be in the book,
Yes.
I'm very pleased to back that. As well as you've got one of the freaking best trailers for your Kickstarter that I've seen.
Yep. So the art is by Dominic Meyer. He's like a German artist, and I found him on ArtStation, and I just think he does excellent stuff. It's like really colorful and stylistic, and I just love it. So he's going to be the main artist for the project, which I'm very excited by, and looks like we'll be able to get quite a lot of art now, much more than I would have expected, which I'm very pleased with.
Yeah, and it really does capture like that grittiness of the setting, like when you look
For
at the
sure.
art.
Yeah.
When are you looking for delivery by?
So the PDF in December, and the books then will be shipped in December, but will arrive in January of next year.
Okay, cool. Tea time with Toby. So the low magic and Viking settings, are there any classes that are just removed from the setting?
Yeah, so we don't have any of the original D&D classes. We have fighter and rogue basically in there, but they've been reworked to fit the setting like thematically. But there's no wizard, no warlock, no sorcerer, no cleric, no druid. So all of the spellcasting classes are no bard, but they have been reworked. They're not reworks of those classes, but there are sort of analogs of like low magic versions of like a bard, which is a singer. There's kind of like the Saith Kona, I guess you could argue is sort of warlocky, but really they're their own things that fit into Viking culture as opposed to taken from D&D. Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, if someone wanted to pick up this product and like cherry pick it for their regular game, would that be a problem? How will the classes in here stand up, or is everything kind of depowered in order to give it the grittier feel?
So I think what you could do is you could take these and use them as just low magic, sort of low fantasy classes for any setting. I think you could potentially use them for Westeros, and like if you've played Adventures in Middle Earth, which I think is just fantastic. Like you can use the classes that they have as well to kind of play low fantasy. So it's kind of similar in that like a lot of the theming is pretty Viking, but if you were inclined to, you could definitely like take the guts and the mechanics and use it to make, any sort of low fantasy setting.
So TrueMate wants to know about Viking undead.
So the Vikings have really strong feelings about undead, and even coming back from the dead. They don't like it because the goal, to some extent, is to die well and to go to Valhalla and feast with the Allfather until the final battle comes. And so the burial of the dead and the treatment of the dead is really important, and how you die is very important. So it's come up a few times in the campaigns that I've run, is that people, like the party, will come across unburied dead, and they'll like take a lot of time out of their busy, hectic schedules to like bury those dead and to give them the proper honors and stuff. If you do see undead, something's very wrong. Like if you're robbing tombs, that's like very unacceptable, because those people who are dead need the things in their tomb in the afterlife. So if you're taking it, they're going to be angry. And they may return, and that's very scary, because you're not talking about zombies, you're talking about, they're called Afterganger or Draugr, both of whom are very powerful undead. Compared to, like, you're never going to see like a skeleton. You're always going to see something that's like very, like something like a white or even more powerful,
So
because the dead shouldn't come back.
For your campaign setting and basically for your home game, how much research did you put into this, or were you already kind of in the know, up to date on Viking culture?
Yeah, so I'm from Dublin in Ireland, which is a Viking. It was founded as a Viking city. It's always been a huge interest of mine. I studied history in college, so I've always been really interested in it. Last year, I wrote a play because I'm a theatre director. I wrote a play about Vikings as well. It's definitely like a huge interest of mine. So it's like a lifetime, I guess, of enthusiasm and interest in sort of the Viking age, and it's gotten more and more, particularly with the language. It's becoming more when I start to write this. There's actually an amazing YouTube channel called Jackson Crawford, who's like a professor of Old Norse, and he will go through and how to say different words and how to like explain all this stuff. So I'm starting to get passable Old Norse, which is like not a skill I ever thought that I would pick up. That's what I'm starting to get.
Can you read runes yet?
Yes, I mean, ish. Yeah, I can read them like to tell the future. Sure.
That's funny. Well, it makes me think of when we went to Concoction, a con, and we kind of like ran to our friends, like, "Hey, you're going to be running tonight," and she's like, "Okay," and I look over at her notebook, because like while we were doing this event, she was like writing notes for the game later. And I look over her notebook, and it's all written in runic, and I'm like, "Why? How did you do that, and why?" And she's like, "Well, because Josh was my fiance. Josh is sitting next to me. If I just wrote it, he would look at my notes. He could figure this out if he had time, but not by looking at it like this." I'm like, people
That's
are
amazing.
weird. I know. People are weird in a good way sometimes.
Yep.
So Fantasy Grounds College wants to know, I can barely read English, let alone another language, and a dead language. Any rune magic, gambling, or debauchery rule mechanics?
So there's definitely rune magic. That's the Gelders. So there'll be like, each rune will have an active effect, like where you can like draw it quickly. So you might scribe it onto somebody's skin or onto your shield or onto a weapon or something. But there's also like a passive effect for knowing a certain rune. So for example, Fehu is like the rune for wealth. It literally means cattle. And so if you like inscribe that onto a domestic animal, you'll have basically cast like charm animal on it, which is like not useful until it is, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the magic is like really specific and like really so like there's rituals that will be really useful if you're running a settlement, so like maybe you need this cow to like walk up to the ritual altar so you can sacrifice it, and you want it to not be terrified, you want it to like do what it's told and that kind of thing. So a lot of the rune magic is like really utility based and specific. Loads of the rituals are very long, like you'll need a day to do a ritual, or you'll need like hours to do it, and so there's not too much for most of the classes of like sudden combat magic. But then the Seidr is basically like is useful in combat because it can use weapons. It's not like a wizard where it's like little weedy sort of dweeb. It's still a Viking, but it has other stuff going on. In terms of like debauchery and stuff, I haven't got any rules for that yet. We have rules for traveling and for like that kind of thing, but that's worth thinking about actually. about about drinking rules.
You gotta be able to properly debauch.
Yep.
The rest of the game wants to know if there's anyone else working on a project with you.
Yes, a couple of people. So there's Nicholas Dawson, who has run a bunch of Iskloft campaigns and has played in most of mine and stuff. So like we've done lots of talking back and forth. There's also Rob from Performance Check, who is helping out as well with the work. Jeff Doty from Encounterbalance, and Taylor Jeffrey from Moms the Nerd. So a little cabal of people who are working and writing and editing and stuff like that. Yeah.
The chat just jumped on me. There was a very important question about 8-legged horses. Yeah, complacent Badger wanted to know any 8-legged horses.
Just one, and it's Odin's. So good luck taking that from him.
I saved a meme the other day, and it's Loki for Happy Mother's Day. And with the horse, I'm like, this is the best.
Right. Yep. Loki has a bunch of real ugly children.
Eye is in the beholder, so beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Someone's ugly kid is someone else's worst deed.
Yep, or like the world serpent or a giant wolf. Yep, it's some scary stuff.
He's prolific. He got around a little bit.
Yep. Other than that, there's lots of travel mechanics that I put in. Just wanted to say, we have because one of the things I note is that in 5th edition, there's not really anything specific for how you travel long distances, and that should be dangerous, I think, in lots of fantasy settings. So we have supply as a condition, which we've added in. So how well supplied you are. So you can start off with well supplied, which is it's kind of like the exhaustion track, but in the opposite direction. You start off with lots of it, and that's good. And then as you kind of start to run out of food and out of warm clothes and out of things like that, you start to suffer effects, which is an easy way to kind of keep track of supply, as opposed to, okay, now you have 11 pounds of food, and what does that really mean? Nobody really thinks about it that way. And then we have new conditions like being snowblind or hypothermia, frostbite, and things like that to facilitate maybe we shouldn't be walking out in the ice. It is kind of dangerous.
So DM Don wants to know, so are the runes from the alphabet real runes, or did you make runes to fit your look?
So they're actually the Viking runes, the Elder Futhark, which are the sort of like the alphabet they would have used, although writing wasn't super common. But yeah, there's 24 of them. It is an alphabet, but they all have individual meanings. So each rune, like I mentioned, like Fehu, Fehu is F, but it also has lots of meanings attributed to it. But it is a real alphabet, yeah.
Yeah, Odin didn't hang on the tree for 7 days for Lloyd to make it up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. Most of the good stuff in here is from real historical stuff.
The Mighty Hob, what kinds of adventures can you expect to play? Do you ever travel along, I can't say it, the World Tree, to Stuffelheim, Elheim, you're going to use all the words I can't say. You're doing that on purpose, aren't you? I know you are. Talk to Ratusk or the Norns, etc.?
Yes, so you can if you were that way inclined. Most of the adventures are going to involve raids in the real world. So raiding villages and then exploring ancient places. There's lots of ancient places in the world, castles built by giants and things like that, and dark forests and whatnot. But if you're inclined and are interested to look into the various worlds of the World Tree, that's something that you can do for sure. Like I said, there will be some monsters included. They won't be common, but if you wanted to run a more mythic sort of game, I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah, Elfbait, aka Eli, had wrote a article on the site about Norse trolls on nerdarchy.com, guys, so you can check that out. That might be of interest to you. So Ben wants to know any mechanics or representation of Ragnarok in the book.
Not at the moment, but it is something I've thought about. There will be a description of it and what the ages look like, because there's 4 ages of Ragnarok that lead up to the final battle or whatever. So there will be a discussion and a description and things like that. I don't know about mechanics, but there'll be lots of information on it for sure.
So, have you ever heard of a series called Last of the Renshai?
I have not.
Mickey Zuckerreicher wrote it. It's old. Well, yeah, it's old now. I think I read it in my teens. It very much draws on Norse mythology.
Right.
Kind of re-envisioned a bit, but yeah, you should check it out. You'll probably dig it.
Yeah, for sure.
One of our group's favorite trilogies that wasn't Wizards of the Coast, but it's actually better than most of those anyway. But
Right.
there was this tribe of Norsemen called the Renshai that got exiled by all the other Northmen because they were just so brutal, and they were raiders beyond like anything else that could be expected because they considered anything that wasn't swordplay beneath them to
Right.
do, so they would just take from everyone else. And they also got accused of dismembering all of their enemies.
Right.
It was false propaganda, I say. But yeah, so it's definitely an awesome series that if you're into Norse mythology, yeah, it goes off in different directions, but it's a lot of
Sure.
fun.
Similar themes. There's a faction, a culture in Iskløft, who are like at the very, very north of the world, past sort of the Arctic Circle, and they're the people who like they represent like the Reaver sort of culture of Vikings, where like they can't grow their own food and they can't really keep things like that, so they have to like take and take and take. So they're like the Renshai, I guess, of this setting. Like they have to reave, they have to raid all the time, and so people are afraid of them for that reason.
So TrueMate wants to know: are there any blessing mechanics in the game, or do you go the route of trying to make sure the gods don't see you?
So there will be like details on religious rituals based on actual historical religious rituals and like historical holidays and stuff like that. Like the traditional or the common sort of Viking way to give thanks is called a bloat, which is like a sacrifice. It doesn't necessarily mean like a human sacrifice or even an animal sacrifice. It's like something that you give to the gods. So it is important to stay on the good side of the gods. Omens are a really big part of Iskloft. So if you see a raven, that means something, or if you see an eagle fly over and it's got a serpent clutching its talons, that means something. And so like all these little things, and there'll be a list of those, can dramatically change how like the players act, I think. So they do a thing, like they kill a person, and then they see some sort of symbol in the blood or like something like that, then they start to get a little bit paranoid, which is great.
So there was a Norse oral tradition of verbal sparring, essentially, or their version of an epic rap battle. Do you use that at all?
I've kind of thought about it. It's tricky to like make mechanics, I think, for speech, just in general. But I do like the idea of like two warriors standing up with each other and like fighting, but also fighting with their words. There's like
There's a term for it. It's like filching or something like that. I'm not sure if that's accurate.
I'm not sure. There's a home gang, which is like an honor duel. So like you can, if somebody like wrongs you, you can challenge them to a home gang, and it's like sort of like a trial by combat, but it's like very sacred, and no one is to interfere, and you have to do it in a certain place at a certain time, and all this sort of thing. So I think that's where it would happen, if anywhere.
So Fantasy Grounds wants to know: does your setting expand on weather, terrain rules, like water, boating, naval stuff? Kind of sounds like it.
Yes, definitely. So weather for sure. There's different climate zones and things like that in the setting, so you can kind of determine at a glance as a GM, like, okay, they're in this part of the world. What does that look like, and what does it feel like, and how cold is it, and things like that? Because it's cold everywhere. Like the warmest it gets in Iskloft is like Ireland or the UK. That's the very, very south. But the further north you go, you get into like the Arctic Circle and super cold, super uninhabitable, and not pleasant. So we do have mechanics for that. For longship combat, that's something I'm looking at for sure, because it's a big part of the Viking world. I've had, I think, in the Saga campaign that I've been running, we've had 2 longship combats already, because you're going to spend a lot of time on a longship, you're going to spend a lot of time sailing and stuff like that. There's a new skill that's been added in, which is sailing, so that you can like be good at sailing as opposed to just like hoping for the best.
So James Leslie's kind of corrected me. It's like flitting or something like that is the term. It's an actual thing. That we had another guest that was talking about. I was like, this is pretty cool. question from Zaref Gaming: is Fenrir an enemy or a fun ally?
The scariest enemy, or up there. I mean, it depends, I guess, on your point of view. But Fenrir is like the wolf that will kill Odin and is a very scary dude. I mean, it depends. Like the worship of gods and the worship of Jotun are kind of one and the same to Vikings. It's like titans and gods in Greek mythology or whatever, so you can worship both. And Fenrir is a Jotun. He's Loki's son, despite being a giant wolf. And there's lots of people who would like look at Fenrir's situation and be like, "Oh, that poor wolf. That's not really okay." So I guess it depends on your point of view. But he's scary, and I'm thinking about standing him, but we'll see.
He is scary. I mean, Tyr is probably my favorite Norse deity. So
yeah, absolute rad lord for sure.
Yeah, he's total badass. So what made you decide to make this in 5e instead of maybe a different system or creating your own system?
I really love 5e. I just love it. I think it's like really versatile. Really, I think it's really easy to modify it and change it for how complex it is. It's also like everyone plays it, which is great, and it's much easier to play test something that everyone plays already than it is to be like, "Hey guys, I've come up with this super weird arcade Viking game. You want to play it?" So that helps for sure. Like playtesting it is super important, and playing it all the time is really important, and we've done that. And it's easier when everyone knows how to play the base game, you know?
Now, we were talking a little bit before we got started off camera, before we went live, about how, you basically started gaming around 2014. And there's you and Andrew Knapp, SR2 Joker, who were relatively new to the hobby, who, in my opinion, at this point, probably have more experience gaming than gamers I know with decades of experience, because you guys have just ran and played so many games, online. So, how many other game systems have you played? I know you were doing Star Wars for a while too, right?
Yep. How many have I played? I couldn't tell you offhand, like a great many. I've run upwards of 10, if not more, I would say. The big ones that I run would be D&D. I ran a lot of Numenera. I ran a lot of Star Wars, and I still run Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Star Wars, which I think is an amazing game. I've run Fate of the Norns, which is another kind of Viking-themed game. I'm looking at my collection over here, like, okay, let's see. I've played Symbaroum. I've played lots of Fate and things like that. But yeah, I'll kind of try anything, and I think it's really important that you don't just get stuck playing one. Like, I love 5th edition D&D. I think it's amazing, but I also think it's really good to play other games and see how mechanics work in other games, and how different mechanics can change the feel of a game really dramatically, and that kind of thing. I recently picked up City of Mist, which is amazing. I love it, but it's very much outside of my usual style of gaming, because I like mechanics and I like crunch, because I like to. For me, a role-playing game is also a game, right? It's not just a role-playing exercise. So I like to be sure on what the rules of the game are. But yeah, so I'll try anything. I've got lots and lots of.
Well, 5e is kind of ambiguous on the rules in comparison to 3rd edition.
Sure. Yeah.
It is very, it's very, but it's kind of the funny thing though. 5e is rules light, but only in comparison to D&D.
Yes. Yeah. It's not rules light compared to lots of actual rules light games. Like you talk about Fate, or you talk about games like that. Those are actually rules light.
Yeah, one of my greatest laments is not getting to play enough different games. Like right now, we have a ongoing Star Wars game going, but we only play it once a month at most. And then we just finished up a stint of doing Marvel superheroes, which that was fun, and that one was a lot of fun because it was a game I used to play when I was a teenager, and it's
is that Phase Rip?
Yeah, Phase Rip. The thing's been dead for 30 years, but.
Yep.
We brought it back for a little while. We played
nice.
A couple dozen episodes, and then of us playing made up characters, and then before that we actually played ourselves in the Marvel universe, off the premise of a live chat gone bad, and we all get sucked into the Marvel universe, which I hate playing myself in any game.
Sure, yeah.
I always rather just have a character the role play I like, because it doesn't make sense, right? We like one of the first things we did was get involved in a bank robbery. I'm like, well, if I'm playing myself, these guys got guns. I'm not gonna like. We haven't. It was
Yeah,
prior to us
right.
discovering our powers. I'm like, I'm
Right.
not gonna start trying to stop a bank robbery. Robbery's saving my money.
Yep. Yeah, I think one time I played myself was in a Call of Cthulhu game, and it worked really well there because in Call of Cthulhu you're not really super, you're just like a person, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it works there. But yeah, I'm the same. I prefer to play a character as opposed to myself.
Call of Cthulhu I have not yet played. It's one I want to, but it's like one I'm always skeptical because like games like that require a lot of player buy-in where you're like willing to be scared and be afraid
Yes.
but you always have like that one dude that wants to make up excuses why they would know how to use weapons and
Sure.
like that
Yeah.
and they want to play it like it's D&D.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of like, I mean, for me, the player buy-in is so important, and it works for Iskloft too because if it's a low fantasy setting and like the players know that there is fantasy in the setting, but the characters don't necessarily. Like they should be surprised when they see something scary. Like when they see a monster, they should be like, "Oh God, what's that?" You know.
Yeah.
So it requires the players to kind of like buy into that and like be surprised when they see a monster and things. You know.
And
Yeah.
that works too. Like if you buy in and if you pretend to be scared, it will actually invoke those emotions if you really can
Yep.
kind of get into your character.
For sure.
Fantasy Ground College has a question. Any Skyrim or 13th Warrior references?
Definitely, there's a 13th Warrior reference with the "Lo, there do I see my father" speech. Like that came up in a game yesterday, and there's lots of like great stuff in that film. For Skyrim, yes and no. Like, I mean, there's parts, but Skyrim is already pretty high fantasy for like a Norse feel. Though I do love Skyrim, I've played it into infinity. You know, just like played the crap out of it. But yeah.
Tea time with Toby. Most important question of the stream: what flavor of vape is he using?
It is passion fruit.
Ooh, hey,
So
only six
yep.
known carcinogens.
Exactly, less than cigarettes.
Oh man, I have not. Oh yeah, you don't smoke anymore. Then you're just vaping now.
Yep.
Nice,
Yep.
good for
I
you,
quit,
man.
quit in January. So it's like over 3 months since I've had a cigarette.
What are you trying to do? Live forever?
I know, yeah.
I smoked from the time I was like 14 to 18.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I smoked, I think, from when I was like 16-ish until January, like this January. But yeah.
And
I just noticed, like, I quit and then I have all this money all of a sudden. So I've bought like, since January, I've bought like 10 new role-playing game books like that I never would have been able to afford before.
oh
Right?
man, what does a pack of cigarettes cost in Dublin?
Like €12.
And what is that in American money?
It's like $15 maybe, something like that.
Yeah,
For a pack.
I remember it was out of hand when I was paying like $2.15 for a pack.
Right.
And then like now you see people paying it's like $8-10. I'm like, that's nuts.
Crazy. Yep.
Like it costs more than a 6-pack.
Yep. If you're addicted though, you'll pay whatever, That's how they get you.
That is how they get you. But we can't smoke weed because that would be bad.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, Mark Bird, how do you represent the need for armor versus being the trope of half-naked Norsemen in freezing cold?
So the berserker goes unarmored because that's like the historical sort of idea of what a berserker is. Actually, two ideas for what berserk means. Either it's hairy shirt or no shirt. But the berserker, like their class feature is that they'll get a coat. That'll either be like a bear skin, a wolf skin, and then currently we have also a coat of raven feathers and a coat of bones. So they get an unarmored feature, but that's because they're like holy warriors of Odin and they like paint themselves in woad and they like have this special thing. But everybody else has to wear armor or else you're going to get killed. If you get stabbed and you're not wearing armor, you're going to die. Yeah, but it's just the berserker that like fights naked, really.
So, like more recently, like historians are kind of debunking the whole berserker idea.
Mhm.
Now, to me, it doesn't matter either way because it's just a fun concept. So do you have any thoughts on that? Because like I guess like the different things that I've seen is no, they weren't actually berserkers. They were just kind of like champions to Norse noblemen that would fight duels
Yeah.
for them.
Yep. So there's like a couple of thoughts. There's some people who still think that they would drink this sort of like mushroom tea that was like diluted, that would like allow them to like not feel pain in the same sort of way and like get into this trance. There's also like lots of evidence to suggest that the pre-Viking people, like the Germanic peoples, did fight without armor. Um, and stuff like that. So I think like generally an actual berserker in the Viking Age would have been, like you say, like a champion who like would wander from place to place, and like they're actually really unpopular in the sagas because they would just go around and like get into fights and kill important people because they're really good at killing people. But I've kind of like taken bits from here and there to like make what people think the berserker is, which is like a naked man who like fights very scarily, you know.
I almost feel like the creating a second class would be kind of cool. Where maybe you change the name or whatever so it's differentiated from the berserker, but the concept itself is a cool one. Of this like champion for hire, the hired gun, which generally they're probably shitty people because they don't really care who they're killing or why.
Exactly, they're just killing for money.
Yeah,
I mean there is one of the Drengr archetypes, which is like the fighter rework, is a Gjaldargengar, which is like a battle goer. So yeah, there is there is like a pronunciation guide and stuff in the book, and like what an explanation of the names and stuff like that, and each like name has next to it in brackets like the actual meaning. Because I'm trying to use as much like authentic Norse as I can, but I know that like not everyone or anyone speaks Old Norse, and that they're gonna have a nightmare with these names. So I'm putting in like translations everywhere. But that's like a champion sort of fighter who will like go from place to place and like fight duels and will fight for a Jarl. So a Jarl will often like need to fight a home gang, but rather than get killed, he'll be like, "Oh, I'll have my champion do it."
Makes sense. That's what I would do.
Yeah, for sure. There's no way I get in a fight unless I absolutely had to.
Dying needlessly is for suckers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that guy over there. You're up. The Mappernomicon has a question. If the Kickstarter becomes even more successful, will you be adding more expensive stretch goals, or is this it?
So all of the main thing I started with was all of the stretch goals will go into the book. I don't want to add swag because firstly it costs lots of money for everybody to like ship more stuff and that kind of thing. But also I just think like you're backing the book, so all of the stuff should go into the book. There's a couple more stretch goals that I have planned if we get there, which I'm stunned by already that we've gotten so far. But there will be a point where there's just like I don't want to bloat the book to the point where like it becomes ridiculous, So yeah, there's some more planned. I think currently we're looking at an archetype expansion because we just yesterday unlocked the foe expansion, which is like going to include a bunch of baddies and stuff which weren't initially going to be in the book, but they sure are now.
There's also the idea too, well, not the idea, but it's just the fact that the more stuff you add as stretch goals into the book, the more expensive the book becomes to make, whether it's adding art, paying writers, paying editors, whatever. And the truth of the matter is, even though you see this like huge number maybe on Kickstarter, that's not going to you. It goes to the production of the book. And as you make the book more expensive, that means the people behind it are actually going to make much, much less.
For sure. Yep. I mean, every time you add pages, you're adding more to the cost of the book, So there's like a hard limit on how many pages I can put in and still make enough money to pay for art, So it's like the margins are surprisingly thin on this thing. Like people, when they look at Kickstarter, see that's so much money, but actually you got to pay for printing and all sort of stuff out of that money. So yeah, it's not quite as like crazy as people think. Like it's still amazing, and I will be able to get lots of nice art, but it's not like I'm not getting all that money from putting it in my pocket,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're looking at doing our first Kickstarter, and we're looking at it, and it's going to be probably pretty expensive when we launch our first Kickstarter. It's going to be like at least $15,000 probably, because we would just rather not have it see the thing come to life than have it come to life and not be able to pay everyone involved. And in this case, we're actually acting as more of a publisher than the writers. So like we want to make sure the writer gets paid what they deserve. We want to make sure we're able to pay the artists for everything. So that stuff adds up real fast.
So fast. Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah, but that it is what it is. What are you going to do?
I saw a question there about unarmed and brawling, and that's like something that there's loads of in Iskloft. I've got 2 archetypes that focus on unarmed and improvised weapons because, like I said at the start, like that there's lots of, to me, the fights, like a fight doesn't ever look like a fencing match where people are like, "Ha, how about you, on guard?" That's like not how fights would go historically. You know, it's grab that dude by the beard and like headbutt him and like smash your helmet into his nose and like. So there's a Reaver archetype for the fighter, which is like a focuses on improvised weapons and can basically like a monk for improvised weapons, except it's a fighter. And then there's also for the rogue a Nithinger, which is like the shittiest, most disgusting, worst dude who will like shank you when you're not looking and who like fights really dishonorably and will like pick up a rock and brain you with it and that kind of thing. There's also like extra feats or heftir as they're called to allow you to like use your shield as a weapon and to like fight unarmed and brawl and stuff like that. So it's a big part of the fighting style.
I'm laughing at the chat a little bit. It's kind of like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu argument for martial arts. It's like 2 guys just standing there wailing on each other. Is not really how it works.
No, never.
Well, and oddly enough, too, like if you look at the, and I was surprised looking at different videos for Western martial arts, like even just using the German longsword, how many grappling techniques there are. But again, it makes sense. You got a guy in a lot of armor. Best thing you can do is get him on the ground on his back so you can then take a little knife and stick it in the creases.
Yep, 100%. Yep. So that's a big part of it is the grappling and also like fighting dirty is like a huge part of winning a fight. You know.
Do you talk about anything like half-handing and
yes.
People don't realize a lot of times they would turn the longsword around and use the hilt like a hammer to bash the joints and lock up joints and stuff like that.
Yep, for sure. There's lots of like techniques like that. So like half swording, where you like grab the end and so you can focus more, and like hilt smashing and like pommel strikes and stuff like that. There's lots of that stuff in there. I go to a sword fighting class every week, and so I have some information on that stuff. I really think it's interesting, and I think like I'm trying to put as much of that sort of stuff in there so that the fighter, particularly the Drengir, has lots of cool abilities that are not just I make an attack, I swing my axe. So it's like, okay, I swing my axe and I do like a short draw, or like I hit them with the blunt end or whatever. These different sort of abilities to make the combat a bit more interesting and dynamic.
That's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, because now if we ever meet in person, you have to spar Ted.
Excellent. Yep.
Ted's like, oh great, and he hasn't done anything in years. But now, anytime I meet someone that does any kind of sword training, I always try to get Ted into death matches.
Right. Yeah, he looks like a brutal killer.
Yeah. Hey, he is the bane of pinkies. He's broken a few pinkies.
Right. Yep.
He had one class where no one else showed up, so the one guy's like, we're going to work on aggression for you today. And then in his very next class, within seconds of starting the match, broke the guy's pinky. And then he was already kitted up, and so he's like, oh, I guess I'll go again. Second guy broke a pinky right away as well. He's like, after that, he just threw his gloves all on the ground. He's like, I'm done. I'm not fighting anybody else tonight. That's how you do it. Prison rules. Break everyone's pinkies. Then they know you mean business.
Then they can't hold a sword.
That's right. Mark Bird wants to know, are you studying HEMA? That sounds awesome to include semi-realistic fighting strategy into RPG games.
So I actually do Spanish fighting, which is called Destraza, or Destrata, I guess. My Spanish is not as good as my Norse. But it's similar. The Spanish stuff is a lot less brawly, but I'm really interested in HEMA. There's not a class that I could find in Dublin, but I watch lots of videos and I practice it. I have 2 longswords in my house, and I practice myself.
Yeah, the guy that makes the Viking shields, he's like, I found a place that's actually near me, and they train in Viking style combat.
Oh my goodness, I'd kill a man to be there. That'd be great.
I forget what state he's in, but it's in the States somewhere. There's got to be something on that side of the world somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I went to Germany, I'd probably find places all over the place. But yeah, Dublin is small.
What are you gonna do, man? You're gonna have to start. Although even the Arma stuff, they kind of just use historical manuals and
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
teach themselves for the most part.
Hmm.
So I guess you could go. You could always go that route. So the
Look into
Spanish
it.
sword fighting. How did you get involved in that?
It's just like there is a class here. I teach theater on a Tuesday in this like community center, and on a Wednesday there's a Spanish sword fighting class there. Um, so I just do that every week. It's really fun. Um, it's exhausting, like way more exhausting than I would have thought because it involves holding the sword out, and like it's kind of fencing ish, but it's more about killing people than like poking them.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's good. It's really fun. But your arm is just falling off after a class because you're holding the sword out at a distance all the time.
What kind of sword is that you train with?
It is a saber.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. But it's not quite curved. It's like straight. It's a specific sort of sword for this sort of Destraza style.
But it's kind of like fencing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Lloyd's a real life water dancer.
Yeah. I wish. Not today.
So nowadays, are you playing in games or running them?
Both. Too much of both. I run an Iskloft campaign every second Tuesday, and I'm starting an Iskloft campaign tonight. That'll be every week on a Wednesday. And then I run a Star Wars campaign. I run a Adventures in Middle Earth campaign that takes place on Mondays. That's like 20-something sessions in. And then I play in a Game of Thrones game. I play in a Roman legionary game that's been going on for more than a year. It's like a total historical Roman Legion game using 5th edition. I play in like a bunch of games that Rob Coletta runs, like a World of Darkness game and a D&D 5e game. I just play a lot of games. I play in Harbinger with Matt Click as well, and like just a bunch of stuff.
That is
too much.
That is a lot of games.
Yeah. But I think it's like really important that if you like make stuff, then you have to play stuff all the time. Like for me with Iskloft, like I play it like twice a week basically, and have done for years. So like I really think that's the only way to make stuff. Like if you want a world build, you should just like come up with a basic idea and then run it, and then think some more and then run it some more. You should always be testing it as you go, and like players come up with better ideas than you can for world building for sure. So you should just be out there doing it.
So Macronomicon wants to know, when you're creating Iskloft and transcribing Norse history, are you exact in your execution or you riff a little?
There's riffing, yeah, for sure. There's like so the sagas and stuff are useful for ideas and whatnot, but like when it comes to his story, like there's some things that make it much harder. So for example, in Viking society, there's actually not much. It's very egalitarian, so either you're free or you're not. You're a thrall or you're a carl, which is like a free man. And like the Jarl, who's like the leader of the society, technically is the same level as everybody else. All the laws apply in the same way. And that's the same for men and women, which is like very weirdly progressive for like a medieval society. So that stuff I'm keeping for sure. But then I also wanted to put like a bit more of a feudal sort of spin on it so that players could understand it easier. Because if you think about fantasy, you're like, okay, but who's the king though? And there isn't one. Everyone's just the same. It's just about how much money you have and stuff like that. So there's a few changes I put into society and stuff. And then also, if you add magic, you have to also think about like, are there priests, and are there, who are these people who like live in the village and who looks over funerals and weddings and stuff like that. So yeah, added in a little bit of stuff. But overall, I'm trying to keep it as close to real history as I can.
So Master of the Game, Juice messing with you, I think. Is Lloyd on Twitch yet?
Not yet, no. It's not my. I've been a YouTube man for many a year, and I'll die a YouTube man. No, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at Twitch as the next thing to go, but I'm like technologically challenged. I'm looking at Zoom, which is what we're using here, whatever. Thinking about using that for Twitch streaming and stuff, but for now, I'm still on YouTube.
We've done a little bit of both. We've dabbled. We've found programs that will actually shoot things to like all the different places at the same time. But at the end of the day, we're kind of YouTubers too. I don't like, so Twitch is more, I feel like Twitch is more about like if you want chat interaction while you're playing the game. But if you don't really want that, There's not like a big point to it because that's what they want anyway. You know, like on
Yeah.
Twitch, that's what they're used to. They want to come. They want to come over there and they want to kind of like be able to interject in your game. Where if you just want people to be viewers and you don't want to really acknowledge or deal with them and you just want to focus on the game, YouTube might be better.
Yeah, I mean that's me. Unfortunately, I'm just like I just want to play the game, and if you want to watch the game, that's great, you know. But I'm like, there are some people who like have stuff where you can like change the game by like donating. I'm like, that's not for me. I don't like that at all. Like, I mean, I love it when people watch the game, and I love having the chat and like seeing people talk and stuff. But like, I'm running the game. I can't be doing that. I can't be like talking to the chat and running the game. It's like not possible for me. You know, I can't concentrate on that many things at once.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I've commented. Will Jones from Encounter Roleplays, like I don't think he's human to be honest with you, because I've literally had him on one of these live chats and he's talking to me, and I'm watching the chat and he's typing and talking to people in the chat at the same time. I might be able to type what I'm saying to the chat, but there's no way I could have two separate conversations at the same time.
No, me either. I couldn't do it.
Either he's just that, or he's just got split personality or something. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
It's insane. So were you anticipating this level of success with your first Kickstarter?
Nope. I mean, I set the number of what I thought I could get by the end, which was 1,500. I was like, okay, that's reasonable. I think like by the end of the month, I should be able to get that. And then we like broke it in 2 hours. So I was pretty surprised by that. And I'm continuing to be surprised that like, because I figured like the people who I know in the community will back it. And I was like, I'll hit like those people will back it on day one and that will be it. But like really, it's gone really big, which is great. I've had to like dust off my Twitch account, Twitter account, and get on there and be like, "Hey," because I never use it. But yeah, it's amazingly successful, and it's like really humbling. All these people are coming out to pay for this nice book.
Well, yeah, I feel like there's definitely a desire in the community for this type of game, whether it's they want the grittiness or they want the Viking aspects or a combination thereof. I've seen a couple other products that have been similar, and people seem to respond really well to them. So there's definitely a desire there. And the interesting part is though, they can go back to your YouTube channel and see you kind of like running the game that's the book is based on.
Yep, and they can see like from the very first days when it was basically like, okay, it's D&D but in a Viking feel, right? And you could play a wizard and an elf or whatever else, and you can see it like gradually over years become this really specific focus thing. So there's like lots of campaigns that like take place at different times, and you can really see the difference in like how now it's super focused and really gritty, but it wasn't always like that, you know. Like when Ryan was playing, it was really a fantasy game, you know, and now it's just not anymore.
I'm kind of envisioning like at some point when the Switch comes and a player shows up with their elf character and you're like, no, this is Iskloft, and they get kicked.
Yep. I mean, I would say the GMs as well. Like when I started it, I used to just like when I post up an interest post to be like, if you want to play, like I used to be literally like, okay, if you want to play this Viking game, here are the things. You can play a human fighter, you can play a human rogue, you can play a human barbarian. That's it, full stop. And you can't play any of the magic ones, and people would still play it. So like I think don't be afraid to like limit or like change things in the way that you run your games, because people will play a strong theme, you know, regardless of like the mechanics.
Well, it's kind of what we've said all along with just gaming in general. You can do whatever you want with it, and then you'll find out if there's interest or not. Sure. As long as everyone going in knows this is the game we're playing, and they're not showing up expecting something else. It's just about matching expectations of everybody at the table.
Yeah.
But
I think it's doable for sure. Like if you just like make it clear what the game's about and like what the feel is, then you could have everybody play a human fighter champion and still have an amazing game. You know, I think as long as like the theme is clear and the idea is clear, then it doesn't really matter. You know?
Like we get we always get these things like, oh, I need to do X because of Y, and a good one is I need to add NPCs to the party because they don't have this or they don't have that. And I literally run a game every Tuesday night that we play with anywhere from 2 to 5 people, and we never have covered all the party roles. And many, many sessions, it was just 2 players. Sure. And generally, it was a bard and like a rogue or a bard and a wizard or a bard and a barbarian. And there's definitely times when when one of the characters is running the halfling bard to the temple because they're bleeding to death. But hey, players figure stuff out. You
For
still have
sure.
fun.
I think it's a GM as well. Like you don't need to be worried about like party makeup. Like unless you're running like it exactly by the book, and you're like picking challenge ratings and like you're going exactly by it. Like you can tailor any sort of game to the amount of players you have and the skills of the characters. So if you have a game that's all fighters, then obviously your encounters are going to revolve around fighting things. But if you have a game that's all wizards, then you can do all this weird like esoteric magical stuff, and it doesn't have to just be kicking in doors and killing skeletons. There's like you can tailor the experience to whoever's playing.
It's all about figuring out what story is going to be told,
Yeah,
and if it doesn't make sense to do a crime heist with fighters and barbarians and rangers.
yeah,
Like that's a thieves game where you're gonna need criminal background and rogues in the party, or spellcasting that can compensate for that. If you're going to
right.
play a soldier game, well, there's some things that probably aren't going to work very well for that. You don't try and shoehorn your group into what you want to play. You see what they
Yes.
have and see what direction they want to go in, and you tell a different story.
Yep, for sure. I mean, I'm starting this game tonight, this Iskloft campaign, and two of them are going to be Sather. So we have a Saith Kona, which is like a scary witch, and a Galder, who's like a rune magic sort of caster. And that's unusual in Iskloft because most of the time you won't have many casters. So I'm really going to have to think about like what happens when you have this many weirdos in one group, compared to usually the makeup in Iskloft tends to be lots of Viking reavers and raiders and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I'm not going to try and force anything on them. I'll see what they want to do, and that's what'll happen.
Do you have a favorite moment from Iskloft that stands
Ooh.
out amongst them all? Because I know there's probably plenty of moments.
Let's see. One of my favorites, and it's like not particularly emotional, but it just really sums it up for me, like grit wise. There was like a fight going on where this like unarmored warrior was fighting this armored one, and he like was trying to get to the armor, he couldn't do it, and so as an unarmed attack, he like grabbed his head and like tried to suck his eye out. Like in this sort of unarmed, sort of improvised attack, and I was like, "That's just so brutal and so violent and so terrible," which I loved. There's also like lots of moments where people are faced with deals. So the elves, the Alpha, will offer you all this crazy power, and they'll expect just a little thing in response. They try and trick you. And sometimes watching people wrestle with that is very, very fun. Like people trying to like figure out their honor versus infinite power. It's great.
Well, we are coming up on the hour marker, just past now. So, folks in the chat, if you're watching or if you're watching later, in the description you can find links to Lloyd's social, YouTube, as well as the Kickstarter. Give it a look, check it out. Hey, even if you don't want to back it, go look at it because the art is fantastic. And like I said, it's got one of the best trailers for a Kickstarter. So it's a good use of like 2.5 minutes of your time, in my opinion. Go check it
Yeah.
out.
Shout out to Locrius Planetoid who made that video. Absolute hero.
Oh yeah, he did a great job. Thanks for coming on, Lloyd, and sharing your,
Thanks for
your
having me, man.
campaign with
Great.
us. And thanks everyone for watching. So until next time, stay nerdy.